No, not when I'm
Not
in.
in our not at all.
Well, let's hope it's not too bad. Well, it looks like we just went live, I think, maybe, hopefully. Come on now. Yeah, we're live.
All right.
It's not telling us that we're live, but we are. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Friday Night with Friends. And what are friends for except to make you late? That's how it works around here. You got to sometimes delay for a friend because they're worth it. We
Yeah.
apologize to all of you. I know that you are all probably hopping up and down and trying to figure out where's everybody and what's happening because we are always early and we've got that loud music that we play you and all that. Well, tonight we've got a special guest for you and he was worth waiting for. At least we hope so. No, I'm kidding. It is. If this is your first time with us, welcome. You are on the digital campus of Newark United Pentecostal Church and we welcome you. And tonight is Friday Night with Friends. This is a great time. We invite friends of all kinds of different friends, different stories, different backgrounds, and they join us in the evening and we share all kinds of stories. So you're going to want to sit back and enjoy yourself. We're looking forward to a great time. Now, our co-host tonight, as you can see, is Brother Moss. He is going to be on and be interviewing a good friend that you see there. And this good friend has been around the world, but suddenly we're now sending him around the world in a way he's not quite used to. So video coming through the computer, audio coming through the phone, Stephen doing his wizardry to make it all work together. And hopefully it's all going to work out. Vincent is going to be on the questions in just a minute. I'm going to get out of the way. So before we turn to our guest and Brother Moss introduces him to you, don't forget our website, newarkupc.info, particularly if you're new to us. That is where you can join a small group. You can submit prayer requests. You can learn more about us. So we'll mention that to you at the end as well. But Brother Moss, let me get out of the way. And why don't you go ahead and introduce our friend and our guest tonight?
All right. Tonight we are so very glad to have with us Brother and Sister Ed Wheeler, Ed and Patsy. These are longtime friends. We have been friends and associated in the gospel since what school year was that? 1965, 66 at Texas Bible College in Houston. And Patsy was Patsy Knight when I first met her. Brother Ed Wheeler is also a Texas boy. He's from the panhandle of Texas, and we are glad to have them with us this evening. They have had, as has been said, what I would consider a worldwide ministry, missionaries, particularly to the Philippines. They have ministered in the United States and Canada as well, and we are glad to have them with us tonight. And I'm going to ask, rather than doing a lot of questioning, I may have some questions to fill in, but if I could just ask them to begin to tell a little bit of their story. And why don't we start with after you got out of Bible school, maybe, unless you've got something particular to put in there, about your early work as a minister of the gospel.
Well, praise the Lord, and I apologize for this being a little late. We got started with this digital world back in Bible school days, but we never surprised at new surprises, and it's good to see our very good friend, Brother Roy Moss. We came to love him and respect him back in Bible school days, and to get on with question. So, so in the first few years, initially after Bible school, we traveled as itinerant preachers, as an itinerant preacher around, and then actually came and sat under Brother Verbal Bean in the Houston area and assisted him as a personal assistant until just shortly before we went to the Philippines, and we resigned in 1974 to begin deputation and landed in the Philippines in March of 1975.
Okay. And I have a note here that you had some health problems along the way. Septic shock in 1980?
Yes, we really wanted to believe God for our healing. We know God's a great healer, and so we started in September with some real with some carbuncles that left me quite ill, and then eventually became very ill and got to the place that we realized that I was really, really low on blood. So much so I was struggling to stay alert. And so my wife and I just prayed a simple prayer. We prayed more fervently over our food. And I just said, God, I need a blood transfusion right now in Jesus' name. And God so wondrously gave me the miracle that we needed. And we just still rejoice at what he did for us. Finally, the sore, the massive sore that developed on my thigh eventually quit draining in February. So this was an illness from September to February. So it was protracted, but God was good to us.
Okay. When you first went to the Philippines, I understand that things were a little bit rough when you first got there, or am I understating that?
Well, it was kind of interesting, and we were trying to live on $750 a month and support a Bible school, which really we needed God pretty often, and God never failed us. There were times we prayed for food, but God never failed us. He always came through and helped us out.
Okay. Patsy, let me ask you about this next one, because I want your take on it, about the sickness in 1984 when he got so bad. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, well, he became very ill, and we stayed home for several weeks, but he was just getting worse and worse, and he wasn't progressing at all. In fact, it was just the opposite. So we eventually went to a little hospital there in Cagayan de Oro City, and that's in Mindanao, and it was quite a hard time. And but back in Manila, we had made friends with a diplomat. We did not know he was a diplomat at the time, but when he became sick, God used, his name is John Chang, and he was a diplomat with Asian Development Bank. God used him to arrange a United States Air Force airlift to get us off the island of Mindanao. Took us to Clark Air Base, and it was so nice to see American soil and that beautiful American flag.
Yeah.
And from there, he became better. There's a lot of story in between, but that's just the highlight.
Okay, what were the problems that he was experiencing at that time?
He was experiencing septic shock. He had, they gave him insulin because they thought he was a diabetic, which he was not. And that is another miracle that he survived that. And then he had septic shock. He had, what do they call that? Staph pneumonia, which began to eat up his lungs, is what it was doing. And so he was in bad shape. He could not even lift his arms hardly. He was unable to even get to the bathroom by himself. He was just really in bad condition. When we got to the Air Force Hospital there at Clark, the head of the hospital staff was on duty, and they worked we got there around 7 o'clock in the morning, and they worked till afternoon just to sit in A line, because his veins were all messed up because of the steel needles that they used in Mindanao. And it was a pretty grim scene. If God hadn't have overtaken and did a miracle, not just one, but many miracles, he would not be here today, Brother Moss. And we're just thankful for the family of God that prayed for us during that time.
Mm-hmm. And
the deal with staph pneumonia is that you secrete a fluid that causes you to lose a lot of lung tissue. So I coughed up lung tissue by the handsful.
Gracious. And I look at my notes here, and you had a bleeding ulcer at the same time?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so
everything Go ahead.
The sickness began in mid-December, and I eventually was airlifted to Texas and finished off and was finally dismissed out of the hospital in early February. So it was half of December and all of January and part of February.
Mm-hmm. So you had septic shock, staph pneumonia, and a bleeding ulcer.
Actually malnutrition too.
Well, anything worth doing is worth overdoing, I guess.
It doesn't look like it now, but I did back then.
All right. So can you tell us a little bit about the work that you did, what you found when you got to the Philippines, and how it developed? What happened?
Well, it was a real challenge, and I guess it added a lot of meaning to the second chapter of John, when early on Jesus had disciples that believed on him, but then later in the chapter, many believed on his name, and he didn't commit himself to them because he knew what was in the hearts of all men.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't have wisdom, and so it took me a long time to sort out the true believers from the people that were there really for loaves and fishes.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a long, difficult process, and part of the difficulty was that we had some misguided people that took us to court to try to steal the property, and so that was about a year and a half of court battle to save the properties we had. So those years were those years, we're just glad they're gone.
Yeah. You can laugh about it now, but it was not a laughing matter then.
No.
Yeah, I fought to stay in the country. They were trying to get me extradited, and it got pretty nasty. But God was good to us.
Okay. And so, having won the battle to keep the property, maybe I should ask, what was the next challenge? Because I know how ministry works. You go from challenge to challenge to challenge.
Well, Brother Moss, so I had difficulty understanding why I had to come home. But the sickness in 1984-85, I couldn't live in the country full time after that.
Okay.
and I was very disappointed because I had gone with the idea of spending all my useful years there. But so in the 16 or so years afterwards, between the time that of the airlift until we got our headquarters facility, we couldn't spend much time in the country. And it was in these years that we lost the people that were basically after loaves and fishes. So after the loaves and fishes people left in the early 90s, God opened the door for us to get a headquarters facility, and we could go and stay in the country 3 or 4 months out of the year. And it was in those years that we really established we established the second generation people. Your first generation people are special because they've come out of paganism, but the second generation people didn't grow up in a home with a television in it. They didn't grow up in a home where they had pagan idols, and so they were really special people. And so we really worked very hard at establishing the second generation people, and then they had a hand in helping us as we reached out into Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Thailand. And we brought in students from all of those countries and worked with them some, but we only got works. We really only had a viable work in Cambodia when we resigned. We were trying to get something started in Vietnam, but the communists just made that impossible. But when we did resign, we had a work and a branch work in Phnom Penh.
Phnom Penh, okay. How many churches did you have at the end in Cambodia?
We had 2 works in Cambodia. We had a total of 22, counting churches and branch works. We had 22 when we resigned, 2 of which were in Cambodia. Okay.
And how many were there when you started? Do you remember?
0.
0.
0. Yeah, it was a miracle how God got us in there, because the Philippine government is one of the 10th most corrupt governments in the world, and to get our visas, we had to pay so much money under the table to get our visas. We decided instead of paying all that money, we would just leave the country and come back, and we'd automatically have a 59-day extension. And it was on that trip out of the country and back that we met a man who introduced us to a man who introduced us to the people that ended up serving God. So Mr. Trung was kind of a shyster, but he introduced us to Hoa, who was a little less of a shyster, who introduced us to Brother Hong and Brother Nyat, who became very faithful and loyal ministers of the gospel. So it was a long process.
You just never know where a contact is going to lead, do you?
Right.
Never know.
Okay. So you had a Bible school, and you had folks, students there from Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Myanmar. Now that's Burma, isn't
Yes.
it? Okay, it's what we.
Yes, that's
old Burma, and they just changed the name of it. Okay, so you brought these students in and taught them, and then sent them back to their countries.
Yes, we had a 3-year program. We had school throughout each day, and we had an eight month program, a 3-year program that we sent our students through.
And then when they got back, do you know what has, if anything has happened, or that you know of that has happened as a result of their witness in their countries?
most of them we don't have much follow up from them. The two that really panned out was Vietnam and Cambodia.
Okay. But we do have
But we,
people in those
we live in hope.
countries. What?
But we do live in hope that someday
Oh, yes.
that fruit of that labor will materialize.
Well, you sow the seed, and then we're not, our job is to sow the seed, and God will give the harvest. If
Yes,
we,
yes.
if we get people there that know it and will share it, God will give us a harvest. So, anything else you can tell us about your work there in the Philippines?
Well, God's very good to us, and when I first started working into Vietnam and Cambodia, we had a lot of hurdles, and at one point I had to leave the country real suddenly. We were having trouble back in the Philippines. The government almost had a successful coup, and it's the first time I had ever set my phone up for international roaming because it was $80-something a minute. But my wife was able to call me, and so I came home in a short notice, and later learned that I had been set up to be kidnapped. So God's just really good to us. He's really, really been good to us.
So one problem prevented another.
Yes, yes, it did.
But the Lord nearly had to see a government overthrown to get you out of there safely.
It's amazing what it costs.
You are a very valuable man, but I've known that for a long time.
So God's really been good to us, Brother Moss. He's really been good to us.
So where are you now?
We're in Madera, California. There's Highway 99 goes the length of the state, and there are 2 trees in the median that marks the midpoint between Oregon and Mexico. And we are 6 miles north of the trees, so we're near the middle of the state.
Oh, okay. Okay. And I presume that you are still active in ministry there?
As much as we can. I still write. I love to write, and I still write. And when COVID's not in the way, I speak in the church here.
Mm-hmm.
And
speaking of COVID, besides shutting down what you can do on the local level, how has COVID affected your ministry in other ways? Opened anything up?
well, it did, Brother Moss. I'm surprised we had so many glitches with Zoom here. I have an old MacBook Pro that the speakers are failing in it, and so I had always gotten on Zoom with it, and so I had to anyway. So I'm using a computer that I don't usually use. So we had glitches, but I've spoken in Prince Edward Island, Texas, Arizona, Nevada, and California,
Sitting
and
in your
Delaware.
living room. Sitting in your living room.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Oh, well, things have definitely changed since we went to Bible college.
Yeah.
Oh my. Yeah, when you drove that Volkswagen back all the way back down to Houston to be in our wedding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That was, this is one of the weddings that I was there when they got hitched, and it was quite a deal. Yeah.
Brother Moss, I remember going to your apartment, and I always enjoyed there because you always wanted to talk about the Lord and talk about the Word of God. and I think that's one of the reasons I was drawn to you.
Well, what better subject is there than the Lord and
it.
His Word? Yes, yes. So I might mention that the first time that I had seen you, since you dropped by when I was pastoring in Bartlesville, you were traveling, getting ready to go back to the Philippines, stopped by and preached for us one night and then went on. But that was, I don't even know how many years ago. And then the first time that I'd seen you again was when we were out there, what, a year or so ago with Brother and Sister Booker.
Something like that, yes.
Yeah, yeah,
It was so nice to have you in our home.
yeah. We really enjoyed it, and we went out for breakfast. And the next morning, I'll share this little point. Now, Brother Wheeler and I are both from Texas. He's from the Panhandle, if I remember correctly, and I'm
Yes.
from farther, still way out in West Texas, almost to New Mexico, but farther down than his area. And Brother Booker is originally from Colorado. And we were sitting at breakfast, and one of the ladies happened to mention that all three of our wives are from Oklahoma. Sister Booker is from Sperry, which is it's a suburb of Tulsa. Sister Moss is from Morris, which is about 50 miles south of Tulsa. And then Sister Wheeler, Patsy, is from Mangum, Oklahoma, way out in the west, almost to the Panhandle of Texas.
Yes.
About how far is it from Mangum to Willow? Do you remember? It's not far.
To Willow, Oklahoma.
Huh?
I didn't understand where you said.
Willow, Oklahoma.
Oh my, it's not far. I would say 40 miles, maybe.
40 miles at most, probably. I'm thinking
Maybe
it
even
might be closer than that, but Willow is where my father was born.
Oh wow, okay.
So you know, we're from, at least at one point, from the same area of the country, more or less. So.
Right. Wow.
So,
well, all of us guys smartened up and got Oklahoma gals.
Yeah, I think that was one of the points being made at the table that morning.
Brother Nelson, he was our district superintendent, said,
Yes.
now don't you go get you a Texas boy.
And of course, that's what you went and did.
That's what I did.
Yeah. I remember that the night that y'all were married, that right after the wedding, whatever reception there might have been there, and some of the boys were a little ornery, and I remember watching y'all head for the car, and some of them were, who knows what they were planning to do, and Eddie picked you up and carried you down the sidewalk to speed up your exit from around that situation. And somehow that is burned in my mind. I can close my eyes and still see it.
Well, my roommate had stayed awake all night waiting for me to come home. He made the mistake of telling me he was going to keep me awake all night, so I just went over to the church and spent the night. And so he missed whole night's sleep. Well, then when they followed us to a large intersection, and he tried to get in our car, it was a two-door, and I left him standing in the middle of a big intersection holding his hand. So he wasn't real happy when I got back home.
He did it. He did it.
Yeah.
Oh, we were young and frisky way back. But
They told us it was pride. which is one of the reasons I was a little aggressive there, is because they'd said they were going to steal the bride, and I thought, well, I hadn't seen anybody here I think can do that.
And sure enough, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think our time is about ready for maybe some questions from the folks that are watching tonight. I am sure glad to be able to talk with you all again. Okay, here's my
Yes.
brother and sister Wheeler. This is my oldest grandson, Vincent, and he's doing the
Oh,
questions and handling the tech for us tonight.
Pleasure to meet you both. We do have some questions stacked up. So the first one is actually for, well, I'll just stay formal, for Brother Moss. So the first one is actually, do you have any funny memories about that young man?
About Brother Wheeler?
Yep, they just used your own wording and said, do you have any funny questions about, or funny stories about him from your past?
Really? I don't have any really funny stories. I do have some pictures from, oh, what would that have been? Probably 1966 camp meeting
Long,
in
yeah.
Amarillo, Texas, Texaco district. And
Okay.
I snapped a couple of pictures while Eddie was working on his car. Something was wrong on his car at camp meeting. And it just so happened that he had somebody who is also on this broadcast tonight, not me, but someone who is on this broadcast tonight, handing him tools and helping him and keeping him from being lonesome while he was working on that car on the campgrounds of the Texaco district. And I've got a couple of pictures of it somewhere. And
Oh,
really
wow.
our association, as he had mentioned earlier, was largely on that. When we were together, we were talking about the scriptures and talking about the Lord. So funny stories, no, there are not a whole lot of funny stories in my background.
All
But,
right. All right.
These are great people.
They probably thought of us as serious-minded, both of us.
Probably so.
All right. So then the next one is for the Wheelers. It asks, when, like what year did you go to Asia and when did you retire?
We first went in 1975 and we retired in 2015.
So 40 years spent on the field. My goodness.
We actually lacked about 2.5 weeks being 40 years.
Oh, that's still a nice chunk of time.
We'll round it up.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And can you tell us of any miracles you experienced while you were in the Philippines, Cambodia, etc.?
Oh, man.
Well, the blood transfusion that I mentioned was a big one, and in 2010 I had a stroke. I picked up a parasite in Indochina that was a spinoff of Agent Orange, and that parasite caused me to have a stroke. And I didn't feel well enough to go to the airport. My nephew was coming in, and I didn't feel well enough to go to the airport. But a student came in and very, very forcefully said, "You must go, sir." And so, because I was in the van, my stroke was not nearly as bad. Where we lived, it would have taken over an hour to get a taxi and then add another hour to get to the hospital. So I had the people that knew a lot about therapeutic massage, and if I had not followed that student's advice, my strokes would have been a whole lot worse. So I guess that's one of the more recent miracles.
My goodness, that is impressive. So let's see, just looking through the other comments here. So another one that's come up is, how did you communicate with the Filipino and Cambodian people? Did you learn the language, or did you use translators, or how did you communicate?
Well, in the Philippines, everybody there that's educated is educated English. So everybody there spoke English, and so we worked with many different languages. So I used a translator. Also used a translator in Vietnam and Cambodia. I had a class in later years there. We had 16 students and they spoke 13 languages. So we worked across so many different language groups that I didn't learn. I was not fluent in any of the languages, but some of the languages I preached in, if my interpreter needed help, I could usually give him the word he needed. Or if he made a mistake, I could usually catch him. But as far as knowing grammar and word order, I never got that far along. So we relied on translators.
All right. So then another one that's come up is, how long have the two of you been married?
54 years, May the 20th.
Yep. That is a good length of time.
It's a good start.
You know, only over twice my entire lifespan. So another
How
one.
old are you then?
So another one that's come up is, why or how did you end up there in Asia?
Well, I had a desire to be a missionary from childhood. We were farm people, grew up on a great big farm, very remote, weren't around people much, but if a missionary came, I'd sit around and listen to the stories, and I still remember some of the names, and had a dream of being a missionary. And so then it was in about 1972 that a missionary from the Philippines came by, and I just felt such a burden to go. And so I told God, I said, God, if you want me to go to the Philippines, you got to talk to my wife. And so he did. But I will say this, that before I asked my wife to marry me, I asked her if she would be willing to be a missionary, and she said yes. So we got married.
That's a cool story. Well, I mean, I know that our church can understand your desire to be a missionary. We have not, I believe, been fortunate enough to have any missionaries come out of us yet, but we're looking forward to the day when someone receives that call. Our church loves missionaries.
Oh,
Well, I mean, missionaries, of course, are the heroes of the faith. You're the ones who go out there and you're the ones who are helping as much as we are to spread that great commission, go to all the world and preach the gospel to every nation. So in the Philippines, what was the food like, and did you like it?
oh,
I like the fruit.
Like the fruit?
I like the fruit, yes. There weren't very many Filipino dishes that I actually could enjoy, but there was a lot of Chinese influence there, and I love Chinese food, so we enjoyed the Chinese influence.
Well, that comes in handy. So what were, for example, some of the dishes that you had a bit more of a problem enjoying?
because,
Well, as far as difficulty enjoying, so we were having a fellowship meeting, and they asked me if it was okay to eat a double dead duck. And I said, "What's a double dead duck?" And they said, "Well, Brother Ben's duck died last night, and we ate him today." And so he stayed down, so I was happy. But what I would do is when I went out into the remote areas, because I went where white faces had never been before. I went in very remote areas, and so I had an array of things I'd carry with me, pinto beans and some cheese and tuna fish and a few things like that, but I always carried sweetened condensed milk. And I found that when I got in the little huts out there, there were some things that I couldn't identify, and it just didn't want to go down. And so I have never put sweetened condensed milk on anything that wouldn't go down and stay. So we were fond of sweetened condensed milk.
Okay. So the next question is, how many children and grandchildren do you two have?
We have one daughter, and she has two children, a boy and a girl.
All right.
They're almost as handsome. They're almost as handsome as Brother Moss's grandchildren.
Well, hopefully I'm not the exception to that rule, but who knows? So the next one is, Sister Wheeler, what was your role there? And then actually a second part of that one, did you have modern conveniences and appliances, or did you kind of have to scrape some stuff together?
I didn't understand.
What was your role there?
At first, I taught at Bible school. I taught music, taught songs, and I taught. Later years, I was the office manager and spoke with ladies groups, was with the young people, the children, children's choir, taught them how to march in, how to march out, and they were really, really cute. The children's choirs was really a lot of times the darlings of our conferences.
That's great.
I'm going to add here, if I may, and so my wife filled a role, especially after we got our headquarters, that was so valuable because she and her team were able to spot so many things that were so critical, and only heaven's going to be able to reveal what a great asset she was to the work there. Just it's hard to describe her role, but just when we got our headquarters building, the work really became polished off a lot, and a lot of that goes to my wife and her work there. Pretty incredible. She's not going to say that, so I have to.
Well, just doing your job there then, and doing a good job at it.
Yeah.
Bible does say to give honor to whom honor is due. So then the next question is, tell us some of the outstanding things that happened when you went to the remote places.
Well, one of the first ones I went to, they never had an American car in there. I think I was the second white man that ever been there. Never been a car of any kind. It was normally only four-wheel drive road, 19 miles of it, but I caught it when it was dry. I grew up on a farm, so I kind of had a little experience at make-do stuff. And we'd had a lot of problems in that church. They'd tried to burn the church out, and they had done a lot of things to try to destroy the work there. And so when I went into town, they were pretty upset because the church got so much attention. First car to come in town. So a guy called us out of church, the barangay captain, insisted we leave church and come talk to him. And so he had an old M1 rifle and a pearl handle pistol, and he threatened to shoot us. He was pretty upset, and it was pretty tense. But God helped us out again. And so the next time we came to town, I told him to let the barrio captain know we were coming. My wife and daughter came with me the second time, and the people really flocked around to see white women for the first time. We saw a lot of very primitive tribal people showed up at that meeting.
All right. So let's see the next one. So you mentioned while you were speaking the threat of being kidnapped. So what put you at risk? Was it that you were Christians or Americans, or what factor contributed to that risk?
Americans, an opportunity to take somebody for ransom and demand money.
Okay.
We in that area of the world, between the South China Sea and the Straits of Malacca. The Muslims raised over 30 million in 1 year, kidnapping foreigners and businessmen. So it was pretty lucrative.
Yep. All right. So, did you get your food, the food that you ate whenever you were cooking for yourselves? Did you get that food at a grocery store or market, or how did you get that?
We both, we went to the market and we went to the supermarket.
So both. Okay. So
Uh-huh.
previously you'd said that when you were preaching your messages, you generally used a translator, but you also picked up a little bit of the languages. So one of our church members asked specifically, can you speak, or I guess I could expand that a little bit. Can you speak or understand well enough to communicate any of the Filipino dialects, or generally just English?
Well, I had what I call street knowledge in different languages. Primarily, I knew more Cebuano and Tagalog, but I could get through the markets in several different languages, meaning asking the cost of things and bartering and asking directions and stuff like that. So I had street knowledge in several languages, but I was most knowledgeable in Tagalog and Visayan.
All right. So when you went to the remote places, what kind of facilities did you use to hold church?
Well, many of those were simple bamboo structures. In some cases, they were a home that was being utilized, but oftentimes it was a simple bamboo structure with a nipa roof and bamboo walls and split bamboo for the seats, for the benches.
All right. So 1975, that would be around the era of the Vietnam War. So how did the effects of that war affect your work?
Well, I don't know that we had much direct impact. I don't think it impacted us much. There was an economic zone where they brought refugees in and out, but it didn't really affect us directly personally.
So were there any people you came in contact with that it did affect more?
Possibly so. An answer to a different situation, but it might be of interest. So the Vietnam War itself didn't so much affect us there. It would have more people up in Subic Bay, but I will say that I was over in a remote island and later learned that less than 50 miles away there was a straggler from World War II.
Wow.
Japanese straggler. Yeah, the island of Mindoro, we were not very far. Once they located the man, I checked on the map, and we had been very near him when he was still hiding in the caves over there.
Yep. I've heard the stories of how that war it lasted a lot longer than the actual war did.
Yes, yes.
So let's see. The next question is, what kind of food was plentiful to buy, easy to get a hold of, and what kind of things were scarce?
Chickens were plentiful. Beef was very, very scarce. And pork was readily available. And by the way, it was delicious. And potatoes were scarce. Cauliflower was scarce. They had good carrots. Eggplant was readily available. Lots of good vegetables like green beans, squash. All of that was grown there, so that was easy to get. Plus all the good fruit.
That's interesting. Bit of a different variety from what we get in the States.
Yeah. For apple pie, we used mangoes for our. It was a different taste, but hey, when you're hungry for apple pie, it's okay.
Got to do what you
in,
can.
in the mountainous regions, they grew corn because they couldn't flood the land for rice. And so when they ground the corn, they would put a small container because the mills and everything were so dilapidated. And so the fine corn flour would sift through the smaller openings. And normally they called it tick-tick, and they fed it to their chickens. But we would go down and buy that stuff at a very cheap price, and it made delicious cornbread out of pure corn hearts.
Oh,
Interesting. So let's see. So what other fruits were available?
We usually had our conferences in February, and our guests from America were thrilled to eat fresh watermelons in February. Pineapples were so sweet that we need to find another name for what we eat over here. And we had what we called a mangosteen, which was an exotic fruit. We had lanzones, which I don't know how to describe them. They're about the size of a grape, but a little bit different. It had jackfruit. I don't know if you have an Asian market, but a jackfruit is a huge piece of fruit that's real rough looking. Called lanzone when you get it processed. And of course coconuts. We love the coconuts, and they were readily available.
All right. So just one last question, and that one is, how did you two stay healthy on the mission field? Or did you have problems with that?
My mother sent us vitamins, and we would take them. And later years, we got into the Chinese community, and we took Chinese herbs a lot of times.
My daughter and I both struggled a lot with infections over there. So we both of us had a lot of problem with that. But like my wife said, it was we learned to have a lot of respect for Chinese medicine and for more holistic stuff. Really was a great help.
All right. So I'm going to switch back out with my father, and he will wrap things up.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure, Brother and Sister Wheeler, having you with us. Thank you for taking time and spending it with us. Thank you, Brother Moss, for introducing us to another one of the heroes of our faith.
Right.
And it's one thing to read the Bible and read of all the characters and all that they did, the miracles of Jesus. And it's an amazing thing to see that these signs really do follow them that believe. It's not just the past, it's the present. Even though it's your past, Brother and Sister Wheeler, and slightly ours, it's still within the present. And so thank you for spending time with us. And I trust that our church family has enjoyed, and I hope that your faith is encouraged. And Brother Moss, you have some closing remarks?
I just wanted to mention one thing, that though I had not seen the Wheelers for many years, back there a few years ago, my nephew, Joey Waldrop, went over and spent quite some time helping them in their work there. And I just wanted, I see I have surprised Sister Knight or Sister Wheeler.
Yeah.
That goes back. But yeah, Joey's my nephew, and he really,
Okay, he was a blessing.
We loved them. We loved
really
them.
enjoyed it and came back respecting you even more than he already did when he went there. So just wanted to add that in.
We went over our
What's
Awesome. Well, it's good to have you folks with us tonight. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. And we hope that you will join us. We broadcast every night except for Monday night. So Tuesday through Sunday, we broadcast 7 p.m. every single night. And we would welcome you during this season where we are having to shelter in place and utilize the internet. Thank God for the provision of that.
Yes.
Wouldn't the Apostle Paul have loved to have the opportunity of the internet? He would have saved his feet a whole lot of walking, and he might not have written as many letters, which of course would have been our loss. But anyway, we're glad that you've been with us. Again, let me mention to you that our website is a great place to go if you're looking for information about us and how to connect with us, how to connect with a small group, partner with us in giving, submit prayer requests, all of those kinds of things. Brother, Sister Wheeler, again, thank you for being with us tonight. We so appreciate
Thank you.
it. And we honor you for your time, your service to the kingdom. And we pray God's blessing upon you, that he will continue to be with you and give you blessings. And to the rest of our audience,